When I was 21, I transferred to a college in San Francisco. I checked out a room for rent on Craigslist. It was really nice. It was a 2-bedroom apartment. It was cheap rent and close to the campus, so it was an ideal spot. The girl who lived there was 29 and her name was Beth. She was tall and wide, and she had jet black hair and wore pale makeup. She seemed nice, although a little quiet, but she seemed to like me and agreed to let me move in with her. So far, so good. My first night there, we went out for pizza, and that's when I could tell something was a little off about her. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me how much I looked like Shia LaBeouf. I didn't know what to say, so I just shrugged it off. Thanks, I mean, I look nothing like him, so it just didn't make any sense to me. We got back home. She asked if I had seen her room yet. I said no, and so she took me to see it. Her walls were covered in photos of Shia LaBeouf. She even had printed out photos of him all over her mirror. She owned all of his movies. I didn't even know what to make of it. It was creepy. The whole night. She'd been saying I look like him, and now it's obvious to me she's obsessed with the guy. A few weeks passed, and I never really saw her that much. We didn't spend any time together, really. She would come home from work and practically run to her room. She would spend the whole night in there. She had a creepy, high-pitched giggle, and I would hear her giggling through the walls all night. I would wonder what the hell she could possibly be doing. Occasionally, she would walk out and talk to me for like 2 minutes, and she would always be slurring her words, so I suspected she was drinking a lot. Sometimes she wouldn't say anything and would just stand in the hallway and watch me in the living room. I would turn and see her and be surprised, and then I'd say, "Hello, Beth," and then there would be this long awkward pause, and she would give out her creepy high-pitched giggle. It was uncomfortable being around her. She gave me the chills. One night, I woke up at around 2 a.m. because I heard something that sounded like the front door being unlocked. I came out of my bedroom, and all the lights were off, but I could see Beth standing at the front door. She had her face against it, and she was turning the lock back and forth over and over again. And every time she turned the bolt, she mumbled my name. Max Barker, Max Barker, Max Barker. Seeing her standing in the dark and mumbling my name really freaked me out. And it doesn't help that she kind of looks like a bigger version of the girl from The Ring. I just quietly went back to my room and tried to sleep. One night, I was watching Gladiator, and she stumbled out of her room and turned on the living room light, forcing me to pause the movie, which was annoying. She then asked me if I wanted to hear about her ex-boyfriend. It was an uneasy segue into the topic, but I said sure, and then awkwardly sat back to listen to her. 10 minutes later, into her story, she was so riled up, she was screaming at the top of her lungs about their breakup. I was worried that the neighbors were going to call the cops, and she wasn't listening to me when I was asking her to lower the volume. Amidst all of her screaming, one thing she said really freaked me out. She was in such a fit and yelled, "I'll slit his effing throat!" That was a big game changer. Suddenly, I had no idea what this girl was capable of. She was practically a stranger, and everything I had seen was becoming alarmingly disturbing. After a few more minutes, she told me thanks for listening and started doing her weird giggle. I got out of there pretty fast and went to my room to go sleep. I had a pretty unsettled feeling about being in the house with her, and what's worse is that there was no lock on my bedroom door. I pushed the edge of my dresser in front of it to act like a little barricade. I woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of my dresser scraping against the floor. Beth was pushing the door open. I turned on my light, shouting at her to stop. I could see her through the opening of the door. She might have been drunk and had this insane look in her eyes. I pushed the door closed and yelled at her to go to bed. I could hear her walk back to her room, but I couldn't fall back asleep. The next morning when I went out into the hallway, my heart dropped. I saw one of her steak knives were on the floor by my door. I got goosebumps all over my arms. All I could think of was her saying she would slit that guy's throat. I confronted her about it, and she said she didn't remember trying to push my door open. She said she didn't even remember telling me about her ex. I had enough. My lease was month to month, so I found a new spot and moved out. About a month after I moved, she contacted me. I was at the movies, and my phone was off. When I got out, I turned my phone on, and to my shock, I received 40 plus text messages that she had sent me over the past 2 hours. They were all just insane texts that ranged from everything to, "Hi, how are you?" to, "I effing hate you." It was insane. I didn't respond, and I never heard from her again. I always wonder if I hadn't set my dresser in front of my door, would she have quietly come into my room and slit my throat? It always freaks me out. So for a little bit of backstory, the story isn't all that long. I was living with my ex-boyfriend at the time, and a family friend that I've known since I was in diapers. Our roommate, Stokes, had an old friend that had fallen on hard times, and we all agreed he could stay with us for a bit while he got back on his feet and then found a place, etc. At first, everything went fine. This was in the end of 2008 and first part of 2009. My roommate's friend, Jay, seemed a little crazy, but harmless. He was a self-proclaimed Mew Thy Master, and it seemed like he knew what he was talking about and claimed to have spent a couple years in the military. I didn't know the guy other than what he told me, and Stokes had told me. Stokes had known him for quite a while before we let him in to stay with us. I never felt right about being in the same room with him alone. However, I basically disregarded it as me being 18 years old and paranoid of everything around me due to past encounters with people. My boyfriend at the time, Dan, told me I had nothing to worry about and that people like Jay just liked messing with people. Jay probably lived with us for about 6 months. He did nothing to help maintain the house, and since I was the only one with a stable job, I was basically supporting 3 grown men and myself on a movie theater paycheck. Stokes had help from the state, but I bought her tobacco, as well as anything he couldn't get on food stamps. As the months were on, we started noticing things going missing around the house. Mind you, we didn't have much, but we did have a few things of value. Stokes was involved in computer building / repair on the side to try to make as much money as he could. We all decided it was time for Jay to leave, as the problems didn't start until he arrived, so we kicked him out. We weren't mean or rude, nor did we voice our suspicions. We just wanted to wash our hands of him and be done with it. Jay leaves, says he understands, and doesn't try to argue or put up a fight. All is well and blissfully peaceful for the next 2 nights after Jay leaves, so we think nothing about it and are just happy he's gone. One night, my boyfriend and I got done doing something and then went to bed. Now, I guess I should probably give a description of us. I'm a 5'4" female, 120 pounds. My ex is 6'4" and 135 pounds. I didn't know he was a meth head behind my back, and I was naive enough to believe him when he said he wasn't. He was also 12 years older than me. My roommate Stokes was 6'7", 534 pounds at the time. Jay, 5'7", probably around 145 pounds or so. Anyways, so then, all of a sudden, I'm woken up by a strange noise, and I open my eyes to see Jay sitting on the edge of our bed, by mine and Dan's heads. Our bed is against the wall, and to the right of the door when you walk in. Our heads by the door. Jay had a lighter under his chin and said, "Rise and shine." I won't forget it. I was super scared at this point. I was a tiny 18-year-old woken up by a psychopath in the middle of the night in my pajamas in my own home. He started telling Dan and I all of these terrible things he was going to do to me, like tie me up and torture me. Dan started talking to him, trying to talk him down, and eventually we ended up giving him some small amount of alcohol we had. He wanted cash, but we didn't have any. All in all, it could have been a lot worse, and thinking about it now, almost 10 years later, I really think he was just trying to scare us, but that sure is a messed up way of doing it. I'll never forget that face, or the feelings he invoked in me of being scared, vulnerable, and helpless. Since then, I left my ex-boyfriend, become a great shot with weapons, found an amazing man, and moved on with my life. Leaving my ex was the best decision of my life. He was very mentally ill, and I've no doubt, had I stayed with him, my life would be so much different now, and nowhere near as successful. Jay, let's never meet again. I've been having problems with my dorm roommate since the beginning of the semester. She didn't shower or wash her clothes regularly, left dry top ramen noodles all over the floor for me to step on, didn't wash her hands or flush the toilet, sighed in a way that sounded weird consistently, showered with the door open, and got water everywhere. And so many more things that I hated. Basically, every single pet peeve I had been born with was in this girl. At first, I blamed it on her not understanding American etiquette. She's foreign and from China, but then things started to get creepy. When I went home for the weekend, a few weeks into the semester, I gave her a heads up that I would be gone. She did that weird sigh again and looked sad and betrayed, like I was doing something wrong by leaving her. She said something along the lines of, "Why are you leaving me? I don't like sleeping in my room by myself. I feel more comfortable when you are here." Mind you, I only met this chick on move-in day and only said a few words to her. I should have known to keep my guard up after that. Every once in a while, she would stare off into space, usually for like a half hour. Sometimes, I would catch her watching me, study out of the corner of my eye. After a long day of studying in a library, I went to the patio in our dorm for some ice from the machine and found her with her head on a table with her eyes wide open, staring at something in the distance. I think she scared off the guy I liked because he stopped coming around to see me once he found out she was my roommate. After she creeped me out so much, I started staying away from my dorm, only going there to sleep and grab things I needed. She seemed like a nice person, but I couldn't live with her anymore. I emailed my RD that I wanted a room change. I told her I wasn't comfortable living in my dorm anymore with this girl. I was greeted by two solemn-looking campus police officers and the RD of my building. They calmly asked me where my roommate was, but I had no idea. I told them her usual lurking spots and went back to what I was doing. I knew something was off. I asked them what was up, and they just ignored my question and asked where she might have been. The police officers at my campus are usually pretty pleasant looking too, since there isn't a lot of crime in my campus, and they don't really have much to do. 30 minutes later, I hear banging on my door again. I'm greeted by my roommate, who has tears streaming down her face. She rushes past me into her bed, and then plops down on it. She starts wailing, screaming, and eventually hyperventilating. I thought maybe someone close to her had died. I was feeling sorry that I asked for a room change during the time that she probably needed somebody with her the most. I could only make out a few bits and pieces of what she was saying to the RD. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I promise I won't do it again." The police officer pulled me aside and quietly asked me if there is anything in this room she can hurt herself with. I gestured towards her drawer, where I know I've seen a small knife in it. He went through the drawer, but didn't find anything. Suddenly, she was right behind him screaming, "Don't you dare go through my things. We don't want you to harm yourself. Please calm down. You think I'm gonna harm my roommate? I wouldn't do that. She's just silly. What the hell? I'm not gonna hurt anyone. I just want to be left alone." By then, the RD dragged me out of the room and told me what was going on. She got into a big fight with her best friend, and I didn't even think she had any best friends, or any friends at all, and started sending her threatening emails, and even threatened to kill herself. By this time, I was in complete shock. I just saw someone completely lose it right in front of me. She told me that she had received my room change request and was going to meet with me tomorrow. I told her I would stay with a friend that night. After my roommate calmed down a bit, I went into the room with two RDs, talking to her quietly to pack a night bag. She apologized for acting crazy, and I half-heartedly accepted, grabbed my crap, and got out of there. I was waiting in my dorm common area for my friend to get there when I realized I forgot my blanket. I went inside thinking that someone was going to be in the room keeping an eye over her, but she was alone. She glared at me as I walked past her to grab my blanket. There was pure hatred in her eyes. "Where are you going?" I never heard her use this tone of voice with anyone before. She was livid. "I'm gonna stay with my friend for the night." And then she said, "Why? Because of me?" I swear I saw smoke rising from the top of her head, and a vein in her forehead was about to burst. "Sleepover!" in the happiest tone I could muster. I got out of there and nearly ran to my friend's dorm. I talked to the RD, and there were no more rooms open in my housing complex, and if I wanted to move to another complex, my parents would have to pay an extra $1,000. They are furious and want me to move immediately because the police officer was incompetent. You jeopardized my safety by asking me that question in front of her. They don't want to pay for me to change rooms because it was my university's fault for putting me in this awkward position. I'm just afraid that she's gonna take this out on me. I don't think I can return to my old dorm. She looked like she was out for blood when I went in there last night. Update. I'd completely moved out of my room yesterday and into a new dorm, and my roommates here are really awesome so far. My old roommate has been going to counseling. As for paying the money for my new dorm, I haven't heard anything from my parents yet. I think they don't want me to worry about it. I had a few encounters with my old roommate, but nothing bad. Thanks for listening to my story.